Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting: if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. His Revenge. Episode 9. Chapter 66 to 72. Damien. Maddox and I got back to the pack house in time to send the children off. Liam was already downstairs, hugging his boys. Maddox told me he couldn't convince Missy to go with them, said she was adamant about helping find Azalea. The former Alpha and Luna were standing next to my parents, looking a little grave. We decided they should leave in the middle of the night when no one will be expecting it. We also agreed that they should not tell us exactly where they were going. The fewer people that knew, the better. Lily had Lucas wrapped in a tight hug. Delilah's eyes found me, and she ran at me. I caught her up in my arms easily. "I'm gonna miss you, Daddy," she said, her little arms wrapped around my neck. "Daddy is gonna miss you too, Princess." "It won't be too long," I told her. "Will you call me?" she asked, her face still in my shoulder. "Every chance I get," I said, giving her an extra squeeze. Lucas came over, and I scooped him up, not putting Delilah down as she clung to me. I held my pups close. My wolf was not happy to be letting them leave. "Where's Missy?" Maddox said. I could tell he was anxious but didn't want to be rude. "Shouldn't she be here to say goodbye?" Her door was closed. "I didn't want to wake her," Felix said, coming into the front hall with the rest of us. He would be traveling with our children for extra assurance. Lacey clung to his arm, their hands intertwined. "I'm going to go get her," Maddox said. "She will want to say goodbye." He turned around and dashed towards the steps. I sighed at the poor lovesick kid. For his sake, I hoped they were mates. "Maddox Missy." I linked as we came inside the pack house. "I got nothing from her." Weird. My wolf was even antsier now that she was so close. Although it was late now, she should be up in her room, but she could have fallen asleep. We found everyone in the front hall, getting ready to leave. Missy wasn't here, though. Beta Damien was hugging his kids when I asked, "Where's Missy?" I looked around, thinking maybe I missed her. Shouldn't she be here to say goodbye? Her door was closed. "I didn't want to wake her," Felix answered. He should have woken her up. She would be so upset to miss her brothers leaving. "I'm going to go get her," I said. "She will want to say goodbye." I turned and sprinted for the stairs, not caring how tired my legs were from hours of tracking. I made it to the top floor in no time. The closer I got to her room, the more excited my wolf got. He was bounding in excitement, ready to have our mate. I got to her room and tried to calm myself. I knocked softly before opening the door gently. Her scent hit me like a tidal wave, except so much stronger than before. How had I never noticed she smells like ripe strawberries and mint? My wolf howled in my head, and I breathed, "Mate." My brain finally caught up to my eyes, realizing she wasn't in her bed. Confused, I moved over to the bathroom and threw the door open. "Missy," I called, but there was no one in there. I turned around, panic flowing through me. "Where's our mate?" my wolf called. "Missy." I called to the empty room again. I threw her sheets aside but knew it was fruitless. "Beta, she isn't up here." I linked. I threw open her closet door, and still no Missy. Heavy footsteps in the hallways told me they got what I said. I turned to see Alpha in the doorway, looking around with wild eyes. I looked at him, desperately hoping he had the magic answer. Felix and Beta were behind him. "She's my mate." "Where is she?" I said. "I told her earlier to wait in here for me." I didn't realize I was yelling. Lily pushed her way into the room, past Alpha, who seemed frozen as he stared at her bed. She moved towards me slowly. "Maddox, calm down, all right," she said softly. "She's my mate. I have a mate, but she isn't here." I could hear my voice cracking, my wolf whined in my head. "When is the last time you talked to her?" I don't know. "Hours ago." She was wondering where I was, I stammered. "Okay, and you told her to wait up here?" she asked. "Yeah. I told her I would be back in a bit. But it took longer than I thought, and she isn't here." "Do you have your phone? Did she message you?" I frantically shoved my hand in my pocket to my forgotten cell phone. I opened the screen to see nothing there. I looked up at Lily. "There's nothing. Where is she?" Lily looked back at her mate and then at Alpha. Beta put his hands on Alpha's shoulders. "There is no rogue scent in here. They didn't get inside. She had to have left on her own." "We'll find her," Beta said quietly, but I could still hear him. "Why would she leave the pack house? She was supposed to wait for me." "The cabin!" I shouted. Everyone except Alpha looked at me. "There is a cabin she and Vlad found. They meet up there to be alone. If she went anywhere without me, she went there." My wolf got angry. "I would kill that little punk. He probably convinced her to go there after being missing in action all day, and she would go just to make sure he was okay." "Take me," Alpha demanded. I nodded. He turned to everyone behind him. "Dad, you all should go. We will find her. I am sure Maddox is right." The former Alpha must have been in the hallway. Everyone started to exit the room, and I rushed to follow them. We were downstairs quickly, and I ran out the front door, heading for the trees. I didn't bother to discard my clothes as I shifted and took off as fast as I could. Alpha Liam and Beta Damien kept up with me easily, so I pushed myself even faster. Low growls sounded from Alpha as we got closer. "Maddox, slow down," he linked me. I listened immediately, but I was confused. She was so close, I just knew it. She had to be at the cabin. Alpha and Beta started sniffing all around us as we moved forward at a walking pace. I lowered my nose and smelled as well. Something was wrong. "Is that?" I started to link Alpha. "Vampire," he confirmed. My blood went cold. Without thinking, I took off again. I broke through the trees around the cabin. The vampire smell was all around the cabin. I shifted back and rushed to the door. One of the hinges was broken. It looked like someone had put up a fight as they left. I threw it open and yelled, "Missy!" I couldn't smell her, all I could smell was vampire. I looked everywhere, my wolf frantic in my mind. Beta Damien appeared in the doorway. "She isn't here!" I yelled. He gave me a severe look. He moved away from the cabin. I ran back outside, trying desperately to pick up any trace of her scent. There was so much vampire scent everywhere. More warriors were coming out of the trees surrounding the cabin. Sean ran up to Beta, who seemed to be surveying the area. "Sir, we can't find her scent anywhere. The vampire scent goes in a few directions, but her scent is covered by it completely." "Missy." My head throbbed painfully as consciousness floated back to me. I reached my hand up, feeling dried blood and a healing cut right inside my hairline. "Ow!" I groaned. I pushed myself up and opened my eyes. Cement walls surrounded me. As my eyes circuited the room, I realized someone was standing by the lone door. He stood from his leaning position and stepped into the dim light flooding in from a tiny window near the ceiling. "Vlad. Where are we?" I asked, trying to remember what happened. "Missy, I am so sorry. I tried to keep you out of it," he said. "V, what are you talking about?" I asked, desperately trying to recall how I got here or why I was bleeding. "I swear I did everything I could to keep you safe," V said. I looked around the room again. This looked like a cell. Why would I be in some kind of cell? Then it hit me. My head snapped to Vlad. "Vlad, where am I?" I demanded. "I am going to try and get you out, I promise," he said carefully. "What did you do?" "Missy, I couldn't do anything. He would have killed me. But I swear to you I tried to keep them away from you. The bracelet was supposed to hide you. They took my phone and... So, you didn't ask me to come to the cabin." He shook his head. "I'm so sorry. I remember now. I ran into the cabin, so anxious to make sure he was okay that I didn't bother to notice the wrong scent all around. And it wasn't V in the cabin, it was someone else. I fought him, but he got his arms around me and pulled me from the cabin. I even grabbed the door on my way out, trying to get out of the man's grasp to no avail. Anger rose inside of me. I trusted him. For years now, he was my only friend. I told him everything, and I trusted him. Why? I growled, my wolf pushing to take control. I did everything he asked so he wouldn't touch you, I swear. Have you been helping the vampire that's after my family? I didn't have a choice. You did. You could have told my dad. He would have helped you. It wasn't that simple. But it is. Isn't your dad some kind of special investigator? He could have helped you too. He's the reason I was bit," he shouted at me, looking angry now. I was silent for a moment, waiting for him to explain. His stupid investigations are what got my mom killed and me bit. I lost my wolf, Missy. I am lucky to be alive, but I can't even shift anymore. So, you're one of them. No, not really, he said with a sigh. Then why? 'Cause he threatened you. When? When what? When did you start doing his bidding? About 6 months after we met. It didn't take long for him to figure out what was important to me. Apparently, my dad was wrong in thinking he found a pack that a vampire wouldn't come after. So what? You've been doing this vampire's bidding for almost 2 years. Kind of. I only did what I had to keep you safe. I swear I didn't know he would take your brothers. You helped him take my brothers. He wasn't supposed to touch them. I made him promise not to. And look where those promises got me. I gave him a deadly glare as I threw my arms out wide. I couldn't believe any of this. The whole time. I thought he was my mate. My head snapped up to the window. It's daylight out. It's my birthday. I turned back to Vlad and sniffed the air. He didn't smell any different. I'm going to try and get you out of here, he said solemnly. Just like you tried to keep me out of here, I spat at him. There was a knock at the door. I have to go. Just be good, and I'll get you out, okay? He didn't wait for me to answer. He turned and left the room, the door lock clicking behind him. Where are we? I asked, trying to remember what happened. Chapter 67. Damien, I would really appreciate your help, I said. I stood in the middle of Lily and I's bedroom, pulling on a fresh set of clothes. "Sure, I'll be there within the hour," Langston said. "How is he?" "Not good. His mate and daughter on the same day. He won't eat and won't sleep. His office is destroyed, and he won't even go inside hers," I explained. I needed Langston's help because Liam was on the verge of snapping. Understandably, losing Azalea and Missy so close together is taking its toll, but I have never seen my best friend so broken and angry. "That is to be expected," he said in a low voice. "We'll speak when you get here," I replied. After hanging up, I pocketed my phone. Lily was looking at me, worry written clearly all over her face. I opened my arms, and she didn't hesitate to wrap herself in them. I held her close, letting her scent fill me. "Day, we have to find them," she whispered into my shoulder. "We will, love," I told her. "We need to find them before she has the baby," she clarified. "I know," I said. Azalea's kidnapping was having a negative effect on the morale of everyone from pack leadership down, and Liam's inability to rein in his rage was not helping. I squeezed my mate, wishing I could have sent her away as well. The current working theory was that Delilah and Lucas were previously taken because they were with Liam Jr. and Leo, but I didn't feel safe with any threat around my family. Without Aluna and the Alpha being so erratic, the pack needed its next leading female to help hold things together. Lily pulled away, and I leaned down to kiss her softly. She lingered against my lips. I could feel her despondency. "I am going to go downstairs and help with lunch. Will Langston be bringing any of his warriors along?" She and Azalea were a lot alike. Even with so much on their plate, they still took care of others and did everything they could to hold the pack together. "He may. We should be prepared to house a few just in case. There will be a lot of back and forth until we have a better lead on where the girls might be," I told her. She nodded. "All right." With one more kiss, she left my office and headed downstairs to help prepare things. She was trying her best, but I know she was scared for her best friend. I swore to myself to keep it together for her. I needed to get Liam together for Azalea too. "Lacey, hey, Lily," I said half-heartedly. I stood in the kitchen helping wrap sandwiches to carry down to the prison where extra warriors were endlessly interrogating the few rogue wolves they spared from the attack. "How are you holding up?" she asked. That was a loaded question. Being away from my mate was already starting to wear on me, and it had barely been 2 days. "As to be expected, I guess," I said. "Has Felix called yet?" she asked. "He is supposed to check in tomorrow," I told her. "For obvious reasons, communications are going to be limited." Lily came around the counter and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Hopefully, this won't drag out for long," she said softly, offering me as much comfort as she could. I gave her a half-smile. She let go of me and began helping to wrap up the food and pack the lunches. "Should we try taking something up to Alpha again?" I asked, trying to fill the awkward, heavy silence. "Probably, although he isn't likely to touch it," she sighed. Worry lines were starting to crease her face. She was very close with Azalea being the alpha and beta females, and I knew this weighed heavily on her. "Maybe we should try something she would make him," I suggested. Lily shook her head. "I think we just need to figure out where they are holding her. Damien will figure out how to get her out and use Liam's rage," she said, her eyebrows screwed up in concentration. I sighed and thought about Felix. I wondered how he felt right now. I know he wasn't super excited to leave me behind, but the former alpha insisted they keep the traveling party to a minimum. I assured him I would be fine here at the pack, but the longer we were apart, the more antsy I was getting. My thoughts then moved to the little box sitting on our bathroom counter. I was too nervous to actually take the test yet. I didn't even get to tell Felix about my suspicion before he left with Junior and Leo. "Hey, Lily," I said shyly. "Yeah?" She looked up at me. "When did you know you were pregnant with Delilah?" I asked hesitantly. She raised an eyebrow. Well," she trailed off. "I just sort of knew, I guess." Then there was an incident, and everything was confirmed. "Why do you ask?" I bit my lip. I definitely have felt different, but I wasn't sure if it was pregnancy or stress. "Just curious," I tried to brush it off. "Is there something you are wondering if you should tell Felix when he calls?" "Nothing that I know for sure," I admitted. She gave me a tender smile. "Just because we're in the middle of something bad doesn't mean you can't take a moment to celebrate something good," she said. "We need all the good we can get around here for a bit." Her words felt warm in my chest. "I guess I am nervous about finding out either way, and I don't want him to feel like he needs to come back. Staying with the kids is important," I rushed out. "So, talk to him when he calls. Take the test over the phone if you can," she said. "Or wait if you both want to. More than likely, if you wait, you will know before long anyway, but I can understand waiting to confirm until he gets back." "I guess so, yeah," I agreed. I resolved to ask him when he called. Maybe he would want to know right away. I still felt a bit selfish thinking about pups when Azalea and Missy were held captive by a vampire. "Vlad." The knock on the door told me it is time for dinner. Warwick insisted I join him for every meal in his stupid dining room with its ridiculously long table. When I am not with him, I have been in this same bedroom. I can't help but worry about Missy down in the disgusting dungeon they are keeping most of the captured wolves in. Every time I asked someone about seeing her, they ignored me. I have been too mad at Warwick to speak during mealtime yet and have barely done more than push the food on my plate around. If I still had a wolf, maybe I wouldn't be so useless. I stood up and moved over to the door that opened silently. I took the familiar path to the dining room, anger brewing inside me. I entered the dining room and sat down in my usual seat. Warwick was already seated at the head of the table, and 5 chairs were separating us. Plates of food were set down in front of us, and the thought crossed my mind once again about why he bothered to eat regular food when he is a bloodsucker. It was getting harder and harder to sit by and wait to find out my fate and Missy's. Warwick ate at a leisurely pace, the only sound in the room the soft scrape of silverware against a plate. "You are troubled this evening," he interrupted my stewing. I just stared down at my untouched plate while the fury festered. "Am I your prisoner too?" I asked, not looking up. "No," he said thoughtfully. "You can leave whenever you wish." "And Missy?" "She cannot. She has not fulfilled her purpose just yet," he answered. "This wasn't the deal," I argued, finally meeting his eye. He was calm, as if this whole thing bored him. That only made me angrier. "I don't for a second believe you are so foolish as to think you held any power in our negotiations," he said dismissively. I gritted my teeth. "What about all the other pack members you took?" "They are meeting their purposes, of course." "And their purposes?" "Now, I can't tell you all my plans, can I? You will leave here and run back to your little pack soon enough. I expect you to be made to confess everything even if it is not your choice," he speculated. "Those black fur dogs can have quite the temper." "I want my mate," I demanded. "Ah, but she isn't yours now, is she?" "I choose her." "But does she choose you?" His taunt was like yet another dagger to my chest. When she first got here, Missy didn't acknowledge me as her mate. She tried to scent me, and nothing. I still didn't even know how the mate bond would manifest for me or if I could feel it at all. I don't even know anyone who doesn't have a wolf. When I was taken during the attack on the pack, I never expected everything to end up here. Nevertheless, he continued. You are welcome to leave as you please. I am not holding you here. But you will not be taking the girl or her mother. You have Luna Azalea? I asked. I didn't see her when I was down in the dungeon. Some of the doors were solid like Missy's, while others looked more like a traditional prison cell. Warwick chuckled. You are far too naive to try and manipulate the pieces of this feud, boy. But she's pregnant, I said incredulously. He looked at me with a wicked grin on his face. Wouldn't it be a shame if she were to have the pup before her mate comes to rescue her? He laughed, his eyes lit up in a chilling way. Terror swept through me. I knew he wanted to get back at the Alpha family for some stupid war, but I never thought he would take a pregnant lady and threaten her unborn baby. Warwick set down his utensils and stood from his chair. He brushed imaginary dust from his clothing before turning to leave, saying nothing of his departure. I watched in horror until he was well away from the dining room. Realizing that I was alone, I quickly stood and hastened towards the door. If I wasn't in prison, then I needed to leave. Maybe if I could get back to the pack and explain things to my dad or the beta Damien, I can help get Missy and Luna out of here. I would need to avoid Alpha Liam because he was sure to rip me to shreds before I could even explain things. I moved through the dead halls quickly. The mansion that Warwick used as a base was impeccably clean but also almost barren. There was no one walking among the halls as I found my way to the front door. No one stopped me as I exited the mansion. I tried to keep my pace fast but controlled as I raced down the long drive. I needed to get back to Blood Eclipse as fast as I could before I was responsible for Missy or Luna's death. Chapter 68. Azalea. I rubbed my aching lower back as I paced the room slowly. This was the third night that we have been here, and my concern was starting to fester. I didn't know Missy had also been taken until she was yelling at someone during that first morning. When I heard the muffled voices, I realized they were coming from the small vent opening in the wall, and our rooms must share this opening. I moved close enough to hear them more clearly. I couldn't be 100% sure, but based on the voice, I guessed she was talking to Vlad. After he left, I could hear her crying. I finally got her attention and was relieved to know she wasn't hurt in any way. Neither of us went to sleep again. I did my best to tell her Liam was coming for us, but the longer we were here, the more scared she got. Twice each day, our doors opened, and a tray with food and water was set inside before the door closed again. I am in no position to attack our captors, and Missy could never handle them all on her own. She tried to convince me that we could get out of here yesterday when she noticed there was only one person delivering the food, but I managed to talk her down. It was safest for us to wait for Liam and everyone else to get here. Missy had been quiet for a while now, and I hoped she was sleeping. I slowly paced the small room, trying to keep everything together. I needed to stay strong for both of us. My body felt cold and weak. I idly wondered if I had developed a fever. My baby continued to move in my stomach, but there was far less activity than before. I tried not to worry, reassuring myself that Liam would find us before it was too late. I lowered myself down against the wall carefully, pulling the dirty blanket over top of me again. My heart ached for my children and my mate. Leo and Junior were probably scared because their sister and I had been taken. They were safe with their grandparents, but that didn't mean they weren't scared or confused. Missy was doing her best, but I knew she was scared while also feeling betrayed. Vlad lied to her even if he was trying to keep her safe. And Liam? He was probably going out of his mind, worried and angry. His mate, his daughter, and his unborn pup were taken from him. It all happened so fast. It was a well-calculated attack even if we were on the losing end. Warwick knew exactly how to get to him. My body shivered as I tried to let myself relax a bit. If I did have a fever, I would try not to worry until tomorrow. I caressed the sides of my belly, imagining Liam's soft touch. We could hold on. We could wait for him to come. We would make it out of here. Liam. Gavin had gone feral. His thoughts were no longer coherent, and they were all focused on Warwick, Azalea, and Missy. His never-ending rageful rants were making it difficult to concentrate. I can't keep down food or fall asleep. I needed just a slight reprieve to focus and start connecting the clues we had. I stared blankly down at the maps strewn across the conference room table. I was only vaguely listening to Damien and Langston talking around me. During the previous war, this is the area where Warwick directed his clan from. It took a long time to get someone in there, Langston said. No pack currently holds claim to this part, Damien pointed out. Yes, Langston agreed. No pack wanted to touch the lands after the war, having been under the vampire control for so long. And in this area, we are seeing a surge in disappearances, Damien commented. Not to mention the unexplained deaths and injuries. The hospital here has reported an increase in emergency patients coming in with inadequate blood supplies accompanying flesh wounds that resemble bite marks, Langston said. They were both hovering over a map at the other end of the conference table. If he has really been creating himself an army, then chances are he is back to his former bastion, Damien said. We need to make some decisions about how we are going to approach this. I have put some calls into the other packs surrounding us, but we will need Liam to be a part of the conversation. It is his mate they have taken and his pack that is being targeted, Langston said. I could feel their attention moving towards me. Damien's voice lowered. I can't get him to do much. This isn't the first time she has been taken, but the first she has been taken while pregnant. I know that his bond is in turmoil, but he is an alpha. He has a responsibility to lead his pack against this threat. We can't get his mate back without his leadership. Langston, it isn't just his mate. His daughter and unborn pup are hanging in the balance. You haven't seen how protective and attentive he has been during this pregnancy. We are lucky he hasn't completely snapped yet. Then maybe it's time you talk to him about handing over the Alpha title temporarily, Langston said. We cannot go to war with a leader who cannot function. I am not going to force him to give up his title, Damien Whisper yelled. This pack respects him and follows him. Who else could possibly replace him? You, Langston said. This pack holds just as much respect for you as their beta as they do he as alpha. Your father was a good man, but the pack did not have the same level of respect for Robert and Declan's leadership. I am not talking about anything permanent. Convince him to give you the title until we get his mate back and his focus is not so obstructed. Fine, I said. They both looked at me as I raised my eyes to them. They clearly didn't think I was listening to them. I will give you the Alpha title on one condition. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Finally, Damien asked, what is the condition? Warwick is mine. However I see fit. You find him and point me in a direction, then you let me take care of him, I demanded. His death was going to be slow and painful, and that was putting it nicely. Liam, are you sure about this? Damien asked, hesitance ripe in his voice. I nodded slowly. I don't care. I want Warwick. I want my family back and to punish the leech responsible for their pain. Damien nodded before locking eyes with Langston. We can simply make Damien acting alpha until you are prepared to resume your duties, Langston said. Yes, do that, I said, looking back down. I didn't care about being alpha and fighting a war. I wanted to rip Warwick to shreds over and over until he started to feel a fraction of the pain he has caused. We should make this official, Langston said. How? Damien asked. Bring in witnesses. The Gamma and Deltas. Azrin in Felix's stead. Your mate, Langston explained. The wolves integral to the pack leadership so that everyone is collectively on the same page. Do it now, I ordered. I didn't bother to look up, but I knew Damien wasn't excited about this. He and Langston left the room, evidenced by the closing of the door. Why are you giving up our right? Gavin growled, coherent for the first time since yesterday. I am not. I am handing over my responsibilities so I can focus on finding our mate, I argued. And if your beta does not give your title back? This is not a formal ceremony. I am not losing my position as alpha. He will act in my place. He can make the calls and deal with our pack matters while we find Azalea and Missy. The connection is weak, he growled. I know that. All we have are guesses right now. Then find something solid. Maybe if you would let me think for 5 minutes. Gavin growled in response. We haven't been at such odds since before Azalea. I need to know what involvement Greyback had in the First War. My father was so insistent on getting me to speak to him. He is not on the missing list? Gavin asked, actually being helpful. I walked around the side of the table and pulled the list towards me. Around 50 of my pack members were missing after the attack. I scanned the list, reading the names this time. It had been pushed in front of me multiple times over the last 2 days, but I hadn't retained anything from it. No, he is not. But I am not sure he was checked on. The patrols around the inn have had their hands full enough, I commented. My eyes continued to scan over the names on the list until one struck me. Why is his name on this list? Gavin asked. I don't know. I don't recall seeing Abraham since that day either, I said, my brows furrowed. Although I was still yearning for my mate, it finally felt like Gavin was ready to focus our effort. That boy wasn't good for our pup. But she went to that cabin to meet him, Gavin said. Missy's cell phone lay among the papers and maps in the conference room. It gradually became our war room over the last few days. I snatched the phone up and opened her messages. Damien had found the phone tossed aside while the area around the cabin was searched. It was the only clue left behind. Yes. He asked her to meet him at the cabin, but when we got there, neither of their scents were present. Then if he is missing and she is missing, he has to have something to do with the attackers, Gavin reasoned distastefully. While I do not like the kid, it is possible they knew he was close to her and used him to get to her. Or he is working with them. We won't know until we find him. If the vamps took him, then we may not find him until we find all of them. But I have someone who will do anything to get my daughter back, just like I would. You asked to see me, Alpha? Maddox asked from the doorway. I motioned for him to come inside. Did you know that Vlad is missing? I asked him. His face grew even darker, he looked a bit pale and weary. He found his mate and hasn't been able to connect with her. I could commiserate. But where I was born of alpha blood and had some resiliency, Maddox did not. No, I didn't, sir. I have wanted to seek him out, but Azrin and Sean have kept me busy, he explained. I nodded. I was sure they were doing it to keep him from running off to find her like they were trying to do with me. I want you to look for him. It is possible the vampires took him, but I want every inch of the pack land scoured before we come to that conclusion." He paused for a second, mulling over what I asked of him. "Alpha, I will do anything to get my mate back, including this, but I have to ask, why are you only seeking out Vlad? Isn't there a large number of missing pack members?" "Because he and his father are the only ones that I have reliable knowledge of a connection to vampires," I told him. "What do you mean?" "Vlad was bitten by a vampire before coming to our pack. His father was a special investigator previously that lost his mate working on a vampire-related case." Maddox sucked in a sharp breath. I could see his mind beginning to connect some dots. "Is Vlad a vampire?" he asked. "No. My speculation is that Vlad has lost connection to his wolf, but he is not a vampire," I told him. Maddox nodded. "If you can find him, we may have a stronger lead on Warwick's plans and where he is keeping Missy and Azalea." "I'll do my best, sir. Report to me tomorrow night with what you have found so far," I said, dismissing him. Gavin grunted in my head. "And make sure you eat something. Missy won't be happy if you aren't yourself when we find them." "Respectfully, you too, sir," he said before turning on his heel and striding from the room. "Lacey, I guess you can't tell me where you are," I said. "No," he replied. "I miss you," I told him. "I miss you, too," he replied. "What's wrong? So direct. How do you know something is wrong?" I asked him, deflecting. I waited for him to answer, but he said nothing. I sighed. "Do you remember talking about pups?" I could hear his breath hitch. "Are you?" he asked. "I don't know. I haven't taken the test." "Take it. Right now." He hummed. "Okay." I wasn't sure if I should wait for you or not. He was silent on the other end of the phone. I got off the bed where I was laying in one of his t-shirts. I stepped into the bathroom, where the test box was still sitting on the counter. "Hold on, I am going to put you on hold for a second while I could hear him hum in agreement. I set the phone down, muting the sound on my end. After completing the test, I placed the cap back on the stick and laid it on the countertop before grabbing the phone again. "Okay, now we wait 3 minutes," I told Felix. We both waited silently. A nervous shiver ran through me. Finally, the tiny screen began to change. My breath hitched as I read the result. "Felix, we're going to be parents." Chapter 69. "Missy, Mom, you still doing okay?" I asked her through the small vent that connected our rooms. I tried to be as calm as possible for her, knowing that she will be more stressed if I am freaking out, but it hasn't been easy. I can hear her stifled moans occasionally and am worried about her going into labor. "I'm all right, sweetheart," she said, her voice strained. I was running out of things to talk about that would distract us from being locked in these rooms. My dad needed to hurry up and find us. I tried to keep my mind off Vlad. I hadn't seen him since the very first night I was here. My heart wanted to shatter every time I thought about his betrayal. He was my one. I thought he was my mate. For a long time, I wanted him to be my mate. He made me feel normal. He was my safe place for almost 2 years, and the whole time he was helping the man that was coming after my family and pack. Lee didn't ask about Vlad either. Or Maddox. I suspected she knew it would be too hard to talk about. I knew without a doubt the Maddox would be with my dad when they got here. He wouldn't leave me like that. Unless he found his mate and doesn't care anymore, my wolf lamented. She was growing bitter and desolate the longer we were kept prisoner. Even if he did, he would come to rescue me, I told her. I clutched the moonstone necklace in my fist. It was cool even now. After Vlad had left me in this prison, I took off his bracelet and chucked it across the room where it has sat since. I wished I could burn it or break it. No gift or good intention could make up for his betrayal. I don't want a birthday party anymore, I said aloud. Why is that? Lee asked after a minute. I just want to go away with you and Dad and the boys. I just want to be together, I said. I missed my brothers desperately. When I closed my eyes, all I could see were their teary eyes from the night I helped them pack up their things. Hopefully, Grandma and Grandpa got them to safety. We can do that, but we are still going to celebrate your birthday, Azalea rasped. You can kick and scream, but your father and I still want to celebrate you. The amount of food and water we were getting wasn't enough. And with Lee being pregnant, I was sure it was worse for her and the baby. Her body needed more than mine while she grew a baby. It would be fun to take Junior and Leo to the ocean. We've never been to an ocean. They would love it, I said wistfully. Let's go to the ocean then. We can all play in the sand and swim in the waves, she said. Deal, I told her. We can play in the sand if we make it out of here, I thought darkly. My wolf whimpered. Liam. I was jostled awake by someone. My eyes snapped open to see it was Damien. He had a sympathetic look on his face like he didn't want to wake me up. Everyone has begun arriving. We are going to start in the next hour, he said gently. According to our pack leadership, Damien was running the show now. We have yet to say anything to the pack at large, and tonight we would discuss things with the other packs that have agreed to fight alongside us. Then we would decide how best to rally everyone. I knew rumors were spreading, but that was to be expected. Damien has had his hands full trying to determine our best plan of attack. Yeah, I grunted, sitting up. I fell asleep on the couch in my bedroom, waiting for Maddox to report on anything he has found. Yesterday, he didn't have much. I brought you something to eat. You should probably shower, too, he said. I gave him an annoyed look. He put his hands up in surrender. I'll link you when it's time, he said. He left me alone in my bedroom. I looked around, the whole place felt so empty. Azalea was in every inch of the room, but I didn't feel any closer to her. I couldn't even remember what my life was like before her anymore. The ache in my chest was getting worse each minute she was missing, and my body was feeling the effects. The extent to which a mate was integral to a wolf's being couldn't be understood until they have been lost. I felt it now, far worse than the last time she was in danger. My every thought was on her. I knew she would scold me for being so pathetic right now, but I couldn't function properly without her. I looked down at the food left in front of me. French toast, scrambled eggs, and some sausages. Had I slept all the way until morning? I snatched a sausage up from the plate as I stood. Going to the bathroom, I chewed the breakfast link while pulling my clothes off. I forced myself under the water and managed to at least wash off the layer of filth coating me. My skin felt better, but my body still ached, only Azalea could soothe it. I got dressed before sitting back down on the couch and running my hands over my face. I pulled the food towards me, picking at it. I managed to eat a few bites of eggs, and one of the slices of French toast before Damien was linking me to join him. With a heavy sigh, I stood and took one last look around the room like she was just going to appear or walk out of the closet. I headed downstairs, ready to get this over with and find Warwick. Damien intercepted me as soon as I reached the door of the conference room. He had an apprehensive look on his face. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. We moved down the hall away from the conference room where everyone was waiting. "What?" I asked, vexation lacing my tone. "We just received this," he said, handing me an envelope. It was made of some kind of linen paper, and the wax seal had been broken. "Is this from?" I trailed off, flipping it over. In beautiful, script handwriting was the words Alpha Blackfur. "Yes," Damien answered. "Read it," he said. I pulled the stationery from its envelope and unfolded it. My eyes scanned the page. "He is inviting us?" I asked incredulously as I looked back up at Damien. He nodded. "This is a direct invitation to meet him blow for blow," he said. "Then we need to go. He won't know exactly when we are coming, so if we go now no," Damien said definitively. "We aren't charging in without a solid plan." "I know you want to get Azalea back," I growled. "We need to get the Luna of this pack back." "I know," he assured. "But we cannot do that if we rush off haphazardly. We must be smart about this. We can end all of this in one go and prevent dragging this war out. This tells almost exactly where they are. And you want me to sit back and wait?" "Yes, and if you would think like an alpha for a minute, you will agree." Damien began to raise his voice at me. The logical part of me agreed with him, but it was being outvoted by the instinctual part that needed Azalea. We stared each other down for a solid minute. "Fine," I finally said. "But I won't wait more than 48 hours. The longer we wait, the more danger my mate faced. That pup can come at any time." I waved the letter in my hand around for emphasis. "I know. We will get everything ready as quickly as possible, but Liam, I need to make sure we aren't walking into a slaughter. I know you can't see it right now, but this entire pack is mourning alongside you. Every warrior is ready to fight and get our Luna back, even Lily. But we owe it to them to make sure they will come home to their mates too." My chest was heavy. Warwick was playing a game with us, trying to make me choose between saving Missy and Azalea. If I couldn't get there fast enough, I might not be able to get either of them. I turned and stormed away from Damien, having nothing more to say. I pounded my fist on the door. "Open up, old man," I shouted. His little cottage was in a secluded corner of the pack land, far away from everyone. Ever since Azalea took over the inn completely, he wanted to be left alone. She still managed to get out here and visit him, always worried he would just pass away on her. I could hear slow steps and the thud of his cane behind the door. "Faster," I growled. "Don't hurry an old man." "Where are your manners?" he shouted as he opened the door. "We need to talk," I said. "About what?" he frowned. "Have you not noticed that my mate hasn't called you for a while?" "I thought the girl finally got the hint to leave me alone," he grumbled. "Warwick has her," I said. His eyes widened instantly before his face turned into a deeper frown. "Impossible," he said. "Possible. He has her and my daughter." "I want to know why my father was so insistent on me calling you about this vampire problem," I demanded. He let out a controlled sigh. "Greyback," I warned. "Fine," he said. "Get in here." He turned slowly and hobbled inside his little house. I had to duck slightly as I entered. Azalea had this entire place built to suit him when he retired, so the ceilings were lower than my liking. Greyback slowly made his way into his kitchen and sat in one of the chairs at his table. I stood across from him, waiting for answers. "So, your father told you to speak to me about Warwick, hey?" he said, his voice now low and subdued. I nodded. The war, he paused for a moment, looking away from me. That man took everything from me. My mate, my daughter. Gone like they were nothing. Warwick. I prompted. No, boy. Your grandfather, he said, his eyebrows scrunching. What do you mean? Your grandfather took my mate and daughter, then made it look like it was Warwick. He used them as bait, knowing they would be killed. He did it to fuel me to help him take down Warwick. Why? I was his head warrior, but I was against the war. The vampire problem was only made worse by conceited bigots like Warwick and Johnson. In the north, they get along well enough. Leave each other alone and respect the boundaries. But your great-grandfather and your grandfather just couldn't do that. Warwick is by no means innocent in this feud. I would kill him again, given a chance. But your grandfather did some dark things, boy. So why was my father adamant that I speak to you? Because I delivered the fatal blow to Warwick. I guess I thought so, at least. Why couldn't he tell me this himself? Because I never spoke about it. I came back from the war and left. Moved to the human town. Eventually, I chose a human mate, but she could never fill the hole in me. Then how do I kill Warwick? Greyback was silent for a minute. I left his head hanging by a thread, and it wasn't enough. Remove it completely and take out his heart. Burn the pieces. Make sure there is nothing left of him. Did any other vampires recuperate like he did? I don't know. He was the oldest. A lot of his older kin left him during the war. They grew tired of the fighting. We knew surprisingly little about them during the conflict. Did my father know any of this? Can't be sure. He never bothered me over at the inn. Left me to my will. Can't say I would have listened much if he tried. The only time I have been back to the pack house was for your wedding. Can't say I was thrilled Azalea was marrying a Blackfur, but you don't seem to take much after your family. I would never kidnap the mates and children of my warriors to incentivize them to fight alongside me. You wouldn't need to, boy. Maddox. I returned to the cabin, the last place I know she was at. No matter how many times I came here, I couldn't find her scent anywhere. There wasn't any of the vampire scent left, but it still made me angry. I needed to find that punk and bring him to Alpha, but I was beginning to think he was taken when the attack happened. No one knew why they took other wolves yet, but none of the theories were pleasant. I shivered at the thought and prayed to the moon goddess I would get to Missy before Warwick could hurt her. I sat on the rickety porch of this little cabin. I hated this place. This was where he spent time with her, where he betrayed her. I was wholly convinced he had everything to do with her kidnapping, and I would make sure he was rightly punished. I would find out the extent of his betrayal and make sure he was punished accordingly. Maddox, someone linked me. I realized it was Luke, a friend who was currently running on one of the patrols at the border. What? Where are you? Why? I have someone, and I think it's best if I give them to you before Alpha, he said. Don't tell me you have Vlad. Yes, I do, he said. But you need to get here quick. Everyone else wants to take him straight to Alpha and Beta. You need your pound of flesh first. Where are you? I'm on my way. When I arrived, Luke held Vlad face down in the dirt, his hands tied behind him. He tried coming into the border like no one would question a thing with the pack on the brink of war. The other wolves in his patrol looked angry. I'll take him to the Alpha as soon as I am done questioning him about my mate, I told the group at large. Vlad flinched at my words. Luke hauled him up to his feet and pushed him towards me. Without any preamble, I reared back and punched him square in the mouth. His head snapped back harshly. When he looked at me again, he spat blood from his mouth. "I'll tell you anything you want to know," he said pathetically. I grabbed his arm and pulled him with me toward the pack house. We had a nice long walk ahead of us, and I knew he would probably end up with a few more bruises. I pulled him along silently, trying to figure out exactly what I needed to ask him. Alpha was sure to interrogate him, and I was sure Beta would as well, but I also had questions. "Why Missy? Why my mate?" I finally asked. "You probably won't believe me, but I never wanted to hurt her. I tried to keep her safe," he said. He was struggling to keep up with my pace. "How long was she targeted?" "A little while after he realized I was close to her, that I cared about her." "And what is the vampire to you?" "Nothing. He killed my mom and bit me. I survived, but," he trailed off. "But what?" "I lost my wolf. When I finally woke up, I couldn't feel my wolf anymore. I can't shift and can't link anyone either." "Then how did she get kidnapped if you were protecting her?" "How do you think? Warwick used me. He made promises and just as easily broke them. I thought I was keeping her from harm. I thought if I cooperated, he would leave her alone. And the rest of her family was fair game." "It wasn't supposed to be like that," he said quietly. "Do you know where they are?" "Yes." "Good. Then I am finished. You can explain everything to the Alpha and Beta. Will you tell my dad I am alive at least? He will be notified of your treason." Chapter 70. Damien. "So we have no way of knowing just how large this army he has built is?" one of the alphas in the room asked. "No, we don't. We have a guess, but we can't be sure. We don't even know how long he has been planning this. We believe he has been putting this plan in place for at least 2 years, I explained. Convincing all the neighboring packs that we needed to attack them on their turf was not proving to be easy. We lose the advantage of knowing the land going to them, another pointed out. But if we are smart about this? I tried. How can we be smart when we know so little? And you have an alpha ready to run blindly into battle. Everyone! Langston called, stopping the objections. If anyone in this room lost their pregnant mate, they would be in the same mindset as Alpha Blackfur is right now. He has made the wise decision to hand over his responsibilities to his beta, but we are both asking for your cooperation. We think this is the best course of action." The room was silent for a minute. "Liam has never once second-guessed stepping up to help any of you. Whether it be sending our best to help train your ranks or helping with provisions needed for your people. He has been a model leader for close to 10 years now and deserves our support. We are asking you to help us stop a threat not just to our pack but to our race as a whole. Warwick won't stop with Blood Eclipse, he will systematically come after all of us. He's already shown he can do it with the micro packs to the east of the mountains. Taking down Blood Eclipse will only be the beginning." I hoped the unsettling truth of the situation would get to them. The silence in the room stretched heavily. Finally, someone stood. "We will stand with Blood Eclipse." Then another, "We will fight the vampires." One by one, everyone else in the room stood and pledged their packs to the fight. I looked at Langston. "All right. Now, we need to prepare." Azalea. Cold sweat beaded on my skin, and my breath came shakily. My fever wouldn't go away. I felt my baby less today, and it's setting my nerves off. If Liam were here, he would have taken me to his uncle long ago. Yesterday, it felt like the baby dropped. When Junior dropped, it was only 48 hours before I went into labor. Panic was really starting to set in, and it was difficult keeping calm for Missy. "Liam, where are you?" I whispered. I hugged the blanket around me. Missy had been quiet for a couple of hours now. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I just needed to hold out a bit longer. Liam was going to come, he always came to my rescue. My bladder was in desperate need of relief, and I knew it. I was having trouble keeping the food they brought from coming right back up, but I could drink the water. I closed my eyes and mustered as much strength as I could before pushing myself up from the ground. Even though the room was no more than 12 feet wide, it felt like a mile as I shuffled towards the bucket that was the bathroom. It had a lid, but that only muted the smell so much. I managed to lower myself over the bucket with the support of the wall, not completely balanced on my feet. As my bladder emptied, I felt something fall from my body. I inhaled sharply. If that was my mucus plug, that means this baby may not wait for its father to come rescue us. "Missy." I could hear Lee's whimpers and suppressed cries. She is getting worse, and I knew the baby could come any time. I spent a long time looking over every detail of the room, especially the small vent separating us. If I could get it open, maybe I could help her from this side. I clenched my fist around the moonstone necklace that Maddox gave me. "Dad, Maddox, where are you?" I thought. My wolf was quiet, trying to conserve as much energy as possible. I sat in the corner opposite the gross bucket they gave me for a toilet. I rested my head against the wall, keeping myself upright. They were going to come for us, I knew it. They just needed to get here in time. "Maddox." We finally made it to the pack house. As we approached the front door, I stopped sharply. Vlad almost tripped, but I kept him upright. He turned around and gave me a confused look. "What's WR?" He was abruptly cut off by my fist landing on his jaw, again. I pulled my hand away and shook out the sharp pain in my knuckles. I needed to do that, and it wasn't even for my mate. Vlad groaned, and I had to stop myself from hitting him again. He was already sporting a deepening bruise on his chin from the first hit. The front door of the pack house opened, and Vlad spat blood out onto the ground. He gave me a withering look before turning his head. "You deserved that. And more," I said quietly as Beta Damien and Alpha Langston came running towards us. "Maddox, what is going on?" Beta asked. "He was found at the border," I said. "Alpha wants him brought to him immediately when found." Beta and Alpha Langston looked at each other for a minute before nodding. "Maddox, you can go get Alpha Liam, and we'll take Vlad," Alpha Langston said. "No need," came a voice behind them. Alpha was striding quickly towards us. With no preamble, he pulled back and also punched Vlad straight in the jaw, knocking him to the ground. Beta grabbed him and pulled him back before he could do it again. "Liam, he's a boy," Beta growled. "That has committed the crimes of a man." Alpha roared. "Where are my mate and my daughter? I'll tell you everything." Vlad shouted. "Liam, you need to calm down. He is being compliant," Alpha Langston said. "Get him to an interrogation room now," Alpha yelled. "Liam, calm down. Or I won't let you in the room," Beta threatened. "Like hell, you won't. I am acting alpha, and if I say you are too worked up to go in, you won't. So get it together now." "I want in the room too," I said resolutely. That stopped everyone for the most part. Everyone turned their attention to me. Alpha nodded while Beta looked conflicted. "His mate is missing as well," Alpha said. "He has every right to be there." Beta Damien and Alpha Langston passed each other questioning looks. Fine. But neither of you is to lay another hand on him until we know more. This is not how we do things, Beta finally agreed. We need to call the boy's father, Alpha Langston commented. He walked over to Vlad and lifted him from the ground effortlessly to set him back on his feet. He took him by the arm and led him toward the back of the pack house where the jail entrance was. Alpha broke out of Beta's grip and gave him a callous look before motioning for me to follow. I bowed my head to Beta as I passed him to follow Alpha. The pack's prison wasn't entirely what I was expecting. It went down underground, and there were warriors stationed at each level, including the one where the interrogation rooms were. No one questioned me as I followed Alpha into the dimly lit facility and down to where they would question Vlad. Has he told you anything? Alpha asked me. He said he was trying to protect Missy. He said Warwick used him by threatening her, but he was just trying to keep her safe, I told him. Anything else? Warwick is the vampire that bit him, and it killed his wolf. He can't shift, I told him, trying to recall everything Vlad admitted through my angry haze. You did well, Alpha said, catching me off guard. Thank you, sir, I said. I am glad you are her mate, he said as we stopped outside a window. It must have been a two-way mirror because we could see Langston and Vlad inside. You will make a good partner for my daughter. Once we get her back, I will never let her be hurt ever again, sir, I promised. I had no intention of letting Missy out of my sight for a long time. He may never leave this building again, Alpha said, his voice cold. I nodded my head and looked back at Vlad, who was sitting with his face in his hands, elbows leaning on the table. We will begin when Abraham arrives. Technically, Vlad is not of age yet, so his father has to be notified. What will happen to him? I asked. I haven't decided yet. It will depend on the state of Azalea and Missy when we find them, as well as the other missing pack members, he said. His words chilled me, his demeanor was cold and detached. I had to wonder if this was because of who was missing or if this was how an Alpha acted in these situations. Beta Damien finally joined us. Abraham will be along shortly, he said. Liam. White-hot rage pulsed through me. It consumed me as my eyes stayed trained on the traitorous urchin seated on the other side of the glass. Gavin wanted to rip him to shreds, but I managed to hold back and only hit him once. He had information to give about Warwick's hideout, and I was going to get it one way or another. Maddox shifted uneasily next to me. I could feel the conflicted emotions coming from him. He was angry with Vlad for his treachery and putting Missy in harm's way, but he wasn't comfortable with the possible outcomes here. When Abraham finally arrived, he looked scared. Where is he? He asked. Damien pointed inside the room. Where was he found? Where has he been? Abe, he is involved with Warwick, Damien told him. Abraham paled. No, he shook his head. He wouldn't. Not after his mother. He is going to be questioned, but our laws state that you have the right to be present, I grunted. I just don't understand. Please let me talk to him first, he begged. No. I yelled while Gavin tried to push to the surface with his impatience. Damien gave me a curt look. I'm sorry, Abe, but due to the severity of the situation and the time-sensitive factors here, we cannot allow you to do that. He has already stated that he is willing to comply, so we have untied him, Damien explained. We can allow you in the room, but I have to question him. Abraham nodded before realizing Maddox was also here. Why is a boy here? He is Missy's mate. He realized after she was taken, Damien said in a solemn tone. Abraham looked at Maddox. I am so sorry if my son contributed to your mate's disappearance. No one deserves that heartache, he said sincerely. Enough, I said. It's time. Damien nodded, turning on his heel to lead us into the interrogation room. I would have chosen one of the rooms more suited for forceful interrogation, but I reminded myself that he was just a boy. Vlad looked up as we entered, his eyes connecting with his father's. Dad, he said quietly. Abraham gave him a tight smile. Stand to the side, Liam. Please, Damien linked me. I gave him this, moving over to the side wall opposite the two-way glass. Maddox followed, taking his place next to me. Damien sat down in front of Vlad. I want you to start from the beginning and tell me just how Warwick ended up with our Luna and Missy, Damien said gravely. I don't want excuses or anything else. 3 lives are hanging in the balance, and the longer you take to tell me everything, the closer they get to death. Your fate is decided by how useful your information is and whether or not it helps us get to them alive. Vlad let out a shaky breath and nodded before beginning his story. Chapter 71. We should go now. I growled. Liam, I need time to assemble the warriors and get the pack on board here. Only a select portion knows about what is going on. We should have told everyone days ago. Damien shouted. We know where my mate is. I argued. I want Azalea back just as much as you do, he countered. I let out a thunderous roar at his words. All right, maybe not quite as much, but very close. She is my Luna. But we cannot run in there with no plan and no backup. I tried to calm myself and Gavin down. Logically, I knew he was right. I didn't stand a real chance if Warwick did have an army at his command, no matter how strong I was alone. But logic wasn't ruling my actions. I knew where my mate was being held with my daughter. I knew the condition they were being kept in as well. Every fiber of my being was yearning to get to them, to rescue them. I needed Azalea in my arms, safe. Damien eyed me warily, waiting to see what my next move would be. Fine, I growled. You have until morning. Tell everyone and get them ready to leave. We have reliable information now. We know exactly where they are, and Vlad gave us details about how to get to them. We may not know how many to expect, but we have a much better picture, Liam, Damien tried to reason. An involuntary growl escaped at the mention of Vlad's name. I know. I snapped. I couldn't focus on anything other than getting to Azalea. I needed to get to her, who knows if she and the baby were okay. If you aren't going to talk to the pack or any of the other alphas, you need to go speak with Maddox. He is a flight risk, he should not have been in that room, Damien said. Maddox had rushed out of the prison shortly after the interrogation ended. He barely held his composure through the whole thing. He had just as much right as the rest of us. Missy is his mate, and Vlad contributed to her disappearance. It isn't that simple. Damien sighed. Look, Liam, I can't argue with you. If you want to depart by the morning, we will do our best to be ready. But, for Azalea and Missy's sake, do not run off before we are ready. What do you think will happen to your mate if you get hurt trying to rescue her? I turned around and stormed away, not bothering to respond. I was getting her out tomorrow, one way or another. Warwick would not keep my mate from me even if it killed me to get her out. I found Maddox outside the cabin he brought us to the night Missy was taken. The windows on the front were broken out, and the rock in his hand gave me a good idea of how it happened. Maddox, I called. He turned around, and I saw my own pain on his face. He was struggling to keep himself together as much as I was. One of the culprits behind his mate's abduction was right under his nose, and he could do nothing. He hasn't even been given a proper chance to bond with her yet. He didn't say anything as I stepped out of the trees. "Come with me," I said. He nodded his head slowly. I turned and headed into the woods again, shifting once we were a bit away from the cabin. He followed suit, catching up to me quickly. "Where are we going?" he asked. I jogged, not pushing either of us too fast. "You'll see," I told him. I led him through the pack and towards the smaller houses towards the west. There were pack members making repairs to buildings that had been damaged in all the fighting days ago. When we finally arrived at our destination, I sat back on my hind legs in front of the quaint house with boarded-up windows. A layer of dust and dirt covered the porch and house, but the small lawn was still mowed nicely. Maddox sat next to me, looking at the home, both of us remaining in our wolf forms. "What is this place?" he asked. "This is Missy's house," I told him. His head turned to me, and I could see his confusion. "She lives in the pack house," he said dumbly. "She didn't always." "I know she told you about her real parents," I said. He nodded his muzzle. "When her mother passed away, Azalea and I took care of things for Missy and adopted her. We packed up the house and locked it up so she could choose what to do with it later. It wasn't ours after all, and she wasn't old enough to live alone yet. So why are you showing me this?" "Because she has never once asked to come back here. She has known it was here all along, waiting for her. This was her home, then it was the pack house. Now, it's you." He nodded his head. "And she is my home." "Exactly. You both have lost your families, found new ones, and now found each other. We are about to walk into something very dangerous. You will see things and probably do things that will change you forever. But you need to focus on getting back to your home, to your mate." We were both quiet for a minute. He finally spoke. "Sir, I love your daughter. I loved her before the mate bond blessed her as mine. I am prepared to do whatever it takes to get her back and keep her safe forever. I know I will have to kill, and I accept that. When it's time, you need to be ready. There cannot be any hesitation in your heart. You haven't bonded yet, so things can change for you. If you are serious about your bond, then you stay with me during this. We will get them back," I told him. I wanted to shield him from the atrocities we were walking into, but I knew I couldn't. I have never been more serious about anything. "Azalea." I gritted my teeth and counted slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The clutching pain subsided, and I let out a deep breath only to begin counting again. I felt the first pain about 2 hours ago. I knew it would come eventually, this had to be contractions, and I didn't think these were pretend ones. Liam's timeline just got shorter. With hours between contractions, things weren't bad yet, but I didn't know how quickly this would go. Missy was quiet, and the dim rays of the rising sun were beginning to peek through the window at the top of the wall. "Please let him make it in time," I prayed to the moon goddess. I didn't want to leave my children alone or abandon my mate. "Okay, Gavin, Liam, it's time to find us," I whispered with a tear escaping my lashes. "Damien." Soft murmurs filled the air as the pack assembled on the back lawn of the pack house, everyone buzzed with nervous anticipation of what I had to say. I looked out at all the people I loved and was now tasked with protecting, knowing that some of them could die before the sun set tomorrow. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. The pack quickly silenced themselves, all turning towards me. You could have heard a pin drop, and the expectation was palpable as they waited for me to say something. You all know our Luna has been taken from us, but most of you don't know why or by whom. Our Luna, our Alpha's oldest Missy, and many of our other pack members have been taken by vampires who are set on the destruction of not only our pack but all wolves. An immediate explosion of indignation and bewilderment rang out, making it hard to continue. I waited a moment to allow them to vent the anger and confusion that we'd already been feeling since the beginning. I held up my hand to quiet the pack and waited a moment for them to do so. The crowd was no longer loudly interrupting me, but they were a multitude of emotions. Vampires threatened us long ago, and now they have returned. These vampires have laid in wait for years, creating their opportunity to strike. They've threatened naive wolves within our pack into helping them, and they will stop at nothing to wipe us from this earth. I paused, looking around the yard. It didn't seem like I would have to do much convincing for them to agree to go to war. Everyone clearly understood the gravity of what I was saying. This could mean extinction. Liam was good to our people, I knew everyone would stand with him. I am not truly your alpha, but I have been asked to fulfill that role, for now, to make sure your best interests are protected while Alpha Liam is focused on saving his mate, our Luna. In that regard, I ask you now. Will you allow this invasion of our pack to go unanswered? A loud roar of dissent followed. You can go home to your beds tonight and wait for this threat to find you and your family at your doorstep, or you can stay and fight with me. Fight to save our Luna. Fight to save our pack. I am asking each of you to consider this carefully. I will fight with you, came a call from somewhere in the crowd. This call was repeated around the crowd until it filled the space with a unified, vociferous sound. The sentiment was shared among all the wolves, even those not trained to be warriors in our ranks. I found myself yelling above the crowd, swept up in their fervor for battle, we move at dawn. Preparations began at a dizzying speed as everyone was ready to get our pack mates back and end the threat once and for all. While disseminating the plans we'd made to breach the vampire's stronghold, Liam's uncle Ron approached me. The look of apprehension on his face wasn't unexpected. Beta, he greeted me. Doctor, I replied. I don't think I need to voice my concerns here, he said. I nodded. Azalea primarily would need immediate medical attention when we got to her, but that couldn't happen on a battlefield. Then there were the other captive pack members and anyone injured in the fighting. What do you need? If it is not the worst case, I will need to get the baby out as soon as possible. I may need to take it by cesarean, he said. And worst case? I asked, not wanting but still needing the answer. Worst case, I will not be able to do anything. His tone was grave, and I understood the implication. The other packs have doctors and wolves prepared to help with field treatment. Whatever you need, it is yours. I will need to set up an area to operate. So much risk will come with this. Does my nephew understand the seriousness of Azalea's condition? Does he understand that I may not be able to save them both? I don't know, I told him honestly. But we have to try. I stood with the other alphas at the forefront of a massive group of warriors. Dawn had come and gone, and we'd made the trek to the vampire's estate in only about 12 hours. Dusk was approaching, and we intended to begin the attack once the moon was overhead. We would need all the advantages we could muster. By all accounts, it seemed we had about 1,000 wolves representing 5 different packs, but we wanted to make sure the odds were as stacked as possible in our favor before we continued. The natural peace of the forest surrounding the estate felt wrong as I readied myself and the rest of our force to bathe it with the blood of our enemies. I noticed it had grown silent as we gathered, as if the birds and other animals could feel something was wrong. Liam was pacing near the other alphas, his eyes were transfixed on where he knew Azalea and Missy were being held. He looked like a cross between a rabid animal and a racehorse waiting to be let out of the gate. His single-minded focus seemed to be making the other alphas nervous, but I don't think he could hear anything they were saying anyway. He was too far gone, and all he cared about was his mate. Maddox stood quietly, just as fixated as Liam, but he was looking between the house, Liam, and me, waiting for someone to give him a cue that he could go. I looked over our combined packs, werewolves spilling into every available space within the forest and then across the clearing that stretched between the forest and the vast plantation house we were about to converge on. The other alphas stepped towards me, and Langston pointed to his watch. "It's time." I nodded, then shifted, not bothering to undress. I looked to the sky and howled, the signal to begin our assault. Each alpha howled in return, and the sound of wolves shifting as they ran towards the house filled the air. Liam was off like a streak of lightning, bolting across the field with Maddox close behind. Vampires began pouring out of the house from all directions, so many that I don't know how they all fit. The initial wave of vampires looked like it would swallow Liam whole, but instead, he leapt over them and disappeared. As I rushed to catch up to him, I saw the first line of wolves meet the deluge of vampires with a resounding crash. This wasn't a surprise. They were ready for us. Chapter 72. Liam. Azalea, Azalea, Azalea. The dissonant tone of my voice and Gavin's melding together replayed over and over in my head as I searched for her. As I leapt over the wave of vampires pouring out of the house, I shifted back to my human form. I landed hard on the vast porch outside the front door. I vaguely heard two others land behind me, I think Maddox and Damien, but I didn't care. There were too many bodies spilling out of the doorway still, so I grabbed one of the vampires surrounding me by the face and made a door of my own by throwing him bodily through the wall. The rest of the group decided to find easier prey and stopped trying to surround me as I stalked through the hole, ripping the wall further apart to make room for myself as I stepped through. Now that I was inside, I could see multiple staircases descending into the floor under what appeared to be purpose-built trapdoors that probably blended into the floor when closed. There was no way they fit all those vampires into the house we were standing in, even though it was enormous. An underground lair sitting beneath it explained things. As I looked around for some clue as to which stairway would lead me to Azalea and Missy, I was stopped momentarily by what I assumed to be an older vampire. He looked confident in his movement and approach. I grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off of his feet and bringing him inches from my face. "Where is she?" I roared, his eyes growing wider as he grasped my hand, desperately trying to separate himself from me. Maybe he wasn't as confident as he appeared. His attempts brought him no further to freedom, so he attempted to bite me with our faces so close together. I met his advance forward with my forehead, shattering his nose and rocking his head backward as he howled in pain. I squeezed harder on his throat, feeling his neck starting to snap. I wasn't sure what exactly it would take to kill him, but I didn't care. He was useless if he wouldn't tell me where she was. I closed my hand, shattering his neck, and then smashed his face into the ground over and over until his face was an unrecognizable mess and his teeth laid on the ground, leaving him unable to bite anyone. I let him go, and he fell, gasping and moaning into his pool of blood. I then looked up once more for some sign of Azalea. My gaze fell upon a horrified female vampire whose eye darted between me and the mess I'd made of her comrade. "Where?" I growled. She was next if I didn't get an answer. "Do down the ha-ha hall," she pointed, then dropped down a different staircase, disappearing as I looked towards where she pointed. An expansive hallway began towards the back of the room, leading somewhere else in the house, away from the underground entrances in the front room. I started towards it. Azalea was somewhere in this direction. I could hear Damien and Maddox thundering along behind me as I moved, now running towards the hallway. Once I reached it, I could see that it looked like it would never end. I didn't know if it was magic or just a trick of the light. A vampire came out of the first room, closing the door behind him. I used her in similar fashion to the first to open the door again. There was no one there, but it looked like a planning room of some sort. Useless. Alpha, I think there's something down here. I heard Maddox calling from further down the hallway. I raced towards him, pushing him out of the way as I reached a huge double door that he'd been pointing to. I realized I'd drug the vampire with me, so I used her to open this door too. Her head crushed in my hand as it met the door, a sickening crunch sounding as blood painted the door. Warwick, I heard myself say his name before I knew what was happening. There he was, standing in the middle of what looked like a banquet hall-style dining room, gloating. His pompous face broke into an enormous smile as he saw me, opening his hands and gesturing around the room as if to welcome me. "I see you've found my humble abode, dog," he said with a laugh. "Where?" "Island." "She," I said. Each word was enunciated and carried the weight of my intent to rend him from this earth. "Oh, come now, puppy, don't be so angry. Your kind has taken so much from me that I think we're far from even in the grand scheme of things. It is only two simpering women, after all. The one isn't even really a wolf, is she?" he said, reaching for a tea set with what smelled like blood in it. "Oh, and she's down there." He gestured lazily towards another underground entrance to my right. "Maddox, go," I snarled, my voice becoming less human as I shifted. Gavin and I shared control as my body changed shape. "Oh, I don't think you'll be going down there," Warwick said, his jovial expression no longer reaching his eyes as he moved towards the entrance to where Azalea was. "I didn't give you a choice," I said, my words becoming the roar of my wolf as I finished shifting. I cut off his path towards the door and lunged for his throat. I missed, sending me skidding into a table as he leapt backward. He made it. I heard Damien yell out from somewhere behind me. Good, I thought to myself. He can find our girls. Help me end him, I linked to Damien. It would be my pleasure, Alpha, I heard as he replied in kind. I felt Damien step up beside me, unshifted. He tapped my shoulder twice, and I growled an affirmative response. This wasn't our first time fighting as a pair. I shifted back to my human form, standing beside Damien on two legs now. Warwick was no longer smiling and was staring between us intently. I could only assume he was trying to figure out the best approach to kill us. I wouldn't let him have that chance. I turned towards Damien, reaching out my arm. We both grasped each other's forearm at the base of the elbow. He nodded, so I quickly turned, spinning towards Warwick and throwing Damien overhead as if I were pitching him. Damien rocketed through the air, landing deftly behind Warwick and grabbing him while Warwick was stunned in surprise. I didn't wait, though. I shifted as Damien was landing and leapt forward myself to attack Warwick. I lunged towards him once more. This time, I felt his hand crash heavily into my muzzle as he struck, keeping me away from his throat. Damien had his arm around Warwick's throat, but he seemed to be struggling more than he should to control him with a weird expression on his face. "Did he bite you?" I asked Damien. "I'm fine." Trusting my beta, I continued attacking Warwick. Although Damien was struggling, he was restricting Warwick from moving enough that I was able to bite him more than once. Blood ran freely from his arms, but he continued to land blow after blow. It felt like my jaw or ribs would break the next time he hit me, but I wouldn't relent. He would pay for what he did to my family. How pitiful, you can't even kill me when there's two of you. What a pathetic excuse for an alpha, Warwick said, his voice dripping in contempt. I doubt your pup will find her before she dies giving birth in the cage I've put her in. All reason left my body upon his last words, and I shifted back to my human form, blooding staining my skin. I grabbed a chair by its leg as I walked toward Warwick, breaking off everything but the portion in my hand by smashing it on a table. His eyes narrowed as I got closer, and he spat at me. What do you think you're going to do with that? Dog. He struggled to pull away from Damien just as much as Damien was struggling to keep Warwick within his grasp. Warwick lashed out once more, trying to hit me as he'd done so many times already. This time, I grabbed his hand and stabbed him in the bicep with my improvised stake. He screamed in pain. Keeping his hand grasped firmly in mine, I ripped the chair leg out of his arm and plunged it into his thigh. A guttural screech escaped him as he writhed in pain, trying to rip himself free to pull the stake from his leg. So, I broke his hand. I looked up at Damien and nodded. As he let go of Warwick, Damien pushed him towards me as I shifted again and sank my teeth into his neck the way he'd probably done to innocent victims thousands of times before. I bit down into his muscles, then ripped away from him, tearing a large part of his neck away amidst a spray of blood. He fell to the ground, gasping and reaching for his wound. I spat his blood on the floor and looked at Damien. He looked exhausted but happy that Warwick was finally taken care of. Shifting back once more, I turned to the door. I was intent on helping Maddox find Azalea now that Warwick wasn't a threat, but then I heard glass breaking and a thud. When I turned around, Warwick was gone, and Damien was thrown into a china display on the wall behind us. He was covered in crushed ornate glass, but he was standing as I moved towards him to help him to his feet. He had blood staining his clothes that had to be Warwick's. I'm okay, but he surprised me, he said, brushing the glass from his clothes. I thought he was dead, but he jumped somewhere up there after throwing me into this. He gestured fist towards the second floor, where I could see a broken railing and a trail of blood going upwards from the chair leg laying on the ground, then towards the cabinet. Go, find Azalea, he insisted. I can't leave you here with him, I started to protest, although every fiber of my being was begging me to go towards my mate. You have to go, Liam. I'm fine, and I will finish him. Liam, I found them. Maddox yelled, linking both of us. I can't get them out, though. These doors are impossible to break through. Go, Liam. Damien shouted. Fine, but be careful, I growled out as I turned and ran towards my girls. I'm coming. Maddox, where is she? I thought to myself as I desperately searched an extraordinarily expansive network of tunnels and caverns. It looked like what I imagined dwarven underground cities from a fantasy book would look like. After running past Liam, diving through the door, and running down the staircase, I found myself here. A colossal tunnel opened up at the bottom of the stairs, and I found myself staring at earthen walls lined with lights built into the ceiling and an endless number of doors on both sides of the tunnel. I rushed forward and started opening doors as quickly I could. Nothing. Nothing. Ugh, nothing again. My thoughts were racing as I kept opening door after door after door that were just empty bedrooms, presumably for the vampires on the battlefield outside. They were all bare, most only having a bed and a trunk for clothes. I ripped open a new door. It was different from the rest, with a series of scratches and red stains. When I opened it, I was surprised by a much larger room. It looked like it could fit the entire house above and side with room to spare, and it held rows of what looked like army bunks. There were hundreds of them. Another set of staircases ascended from the wall and up in the direction of the house. This must be where they were all coming from before. A snarl sounded from one of the staircases behind me as a pair of vampires came down and walked towards me. Their fangs were extended, and they looked feral. As they made a beeline towards me, I looked around quickly to make sure no one else was around. I didn't see anyone else in the room, but I also didn't want to draw attention to myself while searching for Missy and Luna. I stepped into the room and closed the door, hoping no one would hear anything if they were in the hallway I'd just come from. The pair disappeared once they came to the sea of bunk beds, but one of them quickly re-emerged. He leapt onto one of the beds and started towards me, jumping from one to another. I couldn't see the second vampire, but I could hear him. It sounded like he was waiting for me to fight his friends so he could surprise me from below. He was moving slower and trying to be quiet. What would Alpha do? I looked around, searching for anything I could use to even the odds. I still didn't know how strong vampires were. I saw what Alpha did to the one upstairs, but he's an alpha. My eyes fell on a broom, and I suddenly got an idea from all the vampire movies I'd watched growing up. I grabbed the broom and waited. The vampire quickly closed the distance and appeared on the bed in front of me. He jumped towards me, arms outstretched and aiming for my neck with his mouth gaping wide. I stepped back into a solid stance like I'd been trained and thrust the broom forward into his awaiting mouth, letting his weight and the force of his jump do all the work for me. The handle exploded from the back of his head, and his expression quickly changed from one of a predator hunting its prey to one of utter confusion and horror. Using the momentum from him jumping towards me, I spun and sunk the broom handle into the earthen wall, pinning him there with his feet dangling as he retched and sputtered. "I guess that works too," I spoke. I'd been planning to use the broom handle as a stake through the heart and into the wall, but his open mouth presented a better opportunity. I heard running and quickly turned around, searching for the second half of the pair. My wolf was violently pushing to take control. He wanted me to let him out. "Not now, Tom." He quieted some, but he was still grumbling. I looked around to see the vampire wasn't running towards me but away. He was probably running to get more vampires, but I didn't have time to worry about that. I turned and headed back through the door I'd come through and down the hall. The plain wooden doors ended, and after several twists and turns, the main tunnel was once again filled with rooms. This time, they were prison cells. Iron bars lined the walls segmenting small cells where I could see a myriad of wolves laying in varying states of injury and caked with blood and dirt. A large key hung on the wall in front of the cells, so I grabbed it and shoved it into the keyhole of the first cell. The cell sprung open, and I moved on to the next while telling the wolves to try shifting to get outside and that I would come back to help them if they couldn't. I frantically continued searching for any sign of Missy and her mom, but there was nothing. "I'm so stupid, I can link her," I burst. "Missy." "Maddox," she replied, sounding desperate but relieved. "Where are you?" I asked. "I'm in a small room. There's nothing in here, it's just a stone box with a window. I can see the moon, but I'm not strong enough to get out." "Yell." "I'm trying to find you, but I'm looking at empty cells and don't see you anywhere." Muffled sounds came from a bend in the tunnel, and I ran towards it. The tunnel sloped upwards now and eventually leveled off. With how far I'd gone down the first time, it seemed like we were right under the house now, probably about basement level. The sound grew louder and clearer as I got closer until finally, I found two doors that were more fortified than the ones before them. The key that worked for the other cells wouldn't fit into the lock on the first door, so I tried kicking it in. It didn't even budge. I started pounding on the door, and Missy answered me from the other side with her own pounding. "Save Azalea first," she screamed. Then I heard Azalea scream, followed by silence. "She's having the baby. Luna. Can you hear me?" I yelled as I pounded on the second door. Another scream of pain ripped through the hallway, overpowering Missy's screaming and pounding. "I can smell blood from her cell. You need to hurry," Missy said, linking me to make sure I could hear her words clearly. Tom was writhing within me with my mate so close, hearing the terror in her voice. It was all I could do to keep him at bay, and no matter how hard I punched and kicked, I couldn't get the door open. "Liam, I found them." The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.